fairly short presentation on the privacy threat that the smart meters pose. And then I will go on into talking a little bit about the legal and political stuff, what we're doing about it, what we're doing in order to fight for an opt-out, and that kind of thing, what you can do. We're going to talk about some of your options, and then we'll go into the question and answer period. Okay, so with that, let me get going. First of all, why is privacy important? The freedom to lead our lives depends on our being able to establish areas of our lives that are not monitored and controlled by others. Now, examples. If our employer can pry into all our daily living habits, it may turn out that we have to conform to the employer's dictates in order to hold on to our jobs. If an insurance company can pry into all our daily living habits, it may turn out that we are denied insurance unless we live according to its dictates. It's not too hard to imagine a future where when you sign up for insurance, they tell you, well, you know, we'll give you this rate, but you've got to promise to work out or take care of yourself or whatever, and you get this rate. Okay? Now they're going to look at your electric usage data and say, wait a minute, your electric usage load profiles show that you didn't use the treadmill often enough. So we're going to cancel you, or we're going to raise your rates. You know, I mean, I can see that happening. And of course, the government. If the government can pry into all our daily living habits, it may turn out that every aspect of our personal lives can be regulated and controlled. The different ways in which that's coming about are very scary. We're talking about putting black boxes in our cars that will keep track of everywhere we drive, everywhere we go. We've got the drones coming in. We've got all kinds of surveillance technology that's just growing like an octopus. And this is one element of it. Okay, there's two phases, two different ways, or two different phases in which the meters are going to attack our privacy. The first one, I call that phase one. That's when they put the smart meter on your house. It could be smart electric meter, gas meter, or water meter. We're dealing with all three now. By far the worst is the electric, but the others are a cause for concern as well. All three types of meters reveal information about your private life. Water meter tells City Hall how often you're taking a shower and how often you're watering your lawn and all that kind of thing. The electric meter reveals the most, and it's kind of, I call it a gateway drug, because it leads to still further intrusion when you're forced to buy smart appliances. I don't see how we're going to avoid the smart appliances because the manufacturers have been persuaded that that's the only kind they should make. You can only hang on to your old appliances so long, eventually you've got to replace them. You will have smart appliances. Now, if you did not resist the smart meter, you're going to have your appliances talking to your utility and telling them everything you're doing. The utility, in turn, can turn around and sell that data. Now, they'll tell you they're not going to do that, but what they say today may have no bearing on what's actually going to happen 5 years from now. Mm-hmm. May even be different management running the company 5 years from now, for all we know. What is the data that's revealed by the smart meter? Once it's installed on your home, even before the smart appliances come, as soon as that meter's on your house, much information will be about your daily activities will be revealed to anyone who can buy the data or hack into the data the meter generates. Okay, each appliance in your house has something that we call a signature, a unique signature. What that means is that, let's say you're running your furnace, for example. That has a signature because it's an electric motor starting up. Motors have certain characteristics. They have a certain amount of current draw. They tend to have more inrush current when they're first starting up, and then they level out. There's also the intermittent nature of a furnace, that it's constantly cycling on and off. A trained eye can look at the utility profile that the meter generates and tell you that, oh yeah, this activity was generated by the furnace. This over here, that was generated when they turned lights on. This was generated when they turned their computer on. This over here, that was generated when they started up the electric vibrator. So all of these things can be discerned from the profile graph that comes off the meter. Now, you might say, well, I mean, it would take a pretty geeky type person to be able to look at that graph and figure out what's going on. Well, actually, that's not going to be a problem, because there are companies already making, manufacturing software and selling software that will transform that geeky graph that I'm going to show you in a minute and present it in tabular form so that a lay person who knows nothing about computers can look at it and know your daily routine. Okay. The signatures of appliances that enable them to extract all this information is the amount of current a particular appliance draws, the duration of the draw, the startup or inrush current, whether the current is drawn in step with the voltage or lags behind, and whether there's a regular pattern of on and off cycle. Okay, this is what the load profile looks like. This is like the raw data coming off of your meter. Okay, the only thing that's not raw here is that labels have been put in that say things like refrigerator, kettle, toaster. Those have been added. You take all those labels out, and what's left is the raw data, straight off the meter. Now, I will admit that this particular graph was based on very granular data from a meter. This particular meter was sampling your usage every minute. So it got a separate reading for each minute of the day. Now, the companies, utilities now are not talking about making it that fine, that granular. They're talking about once an hour. Let's DTE, or on my side of the state says once an hour, unless you sign up for a special program, then it's every 15 minutes. I think consumers are saying once an hour, and they're going to transmit it 6 times a day. Maybe later on, Mr. McGee can comment on that.
Thanks.
But the point is that nothing changes. Once that meter's on your house, the utility can change its mind at any point, send radio signals to your meter that will begin to gather the data in finer time increments. So they could approach this. They could approach capturing your data every minute if they wanted to. If they did, they could create a picture like this. Over on the left, you see some little blips down there, 3 or 4 little blips, and it says refrigerator, okay? Then you come along a little further, and there's a little higher blip, and that's where somebody turned on the electric burner on the stove to warm up a tea kettle or something. There's a high blip that says toaster. That draws more current, so, and only briefly for, you know, maybe 20, 30 seconds, or however long it takes to make a piece of toast. So by the brevity of it and the intensity of it, how high the peak is, you can tell that's a toaster. Then following that, washing machine. About half as high, and you get periodic cycles over a period of, you know, anywhere from 15 minutes to half an hour, whatever. And other things can be identified. The really high peaks are when an electric oven is cycling on and off, or electric heaters. So that's the kind of information a load profile can provide. And this is before you get smart appliances. Okay, the utility, we know they can change the recording interval. Now they say they'll take a separate reading for each hour. Those can be stored in the meter's memory. So even though they're only sending the information out 6 times a day, I mean, they're sending the readings out 6 times a day. As Diana pointed out, there's a lot of other signals that are going to be going on constantly, but the actual meter readings may only go out 6 times a day. But when a reading goes out, it will have the separate amounts for each hour in that transmission. These meters are remotely programmable. They can change the recording times at any time, with or without notice to the homeowner. Okay, software, I was alluding to this a minute ago. There is software on the market already. It's being sold in California. Companies are signing up. They had a bidding or an auction or something to bid for the right to buy that data. California law allows utilities to sell the data. We have no law in Michigan that I'm aware of that prevents the utility from selling the data, even though our utilities keep promising us that they will not sell it. But they are selling it in California, and the software's on the market that can take that data and present it not as a raw graph, like that. The people that buy the information, they don't want to see something like that geeky. But what they want to see is tables and chart in tabular form that says, the routine of this household is they usually get up at whatever time, and they're off to work by such and such a time. So if you want to do telemarketing, these are the ideal times when you should call them.
If you want to know when to break in.
That's the kind of thing they're going to pull out. The insurance companies may want somewhat different kind of information. They may want to check on how healthy your lifestyle is. You might want to know, for instance, if you're getting enough hours of sleep every night. You know, do you think they're entitled to know that? Is that the world we're living in now, that they should know how many hours of sleep you get every night? And how often you use the treadmill? Okay, so this is consumer profiling. If you look at this graph again, if you study it, you can figure out when is this customer sleeping. Okay? Anybody, if you think you know where on this time, this is time horizontal. Starting with 0 hours, and then 2 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours, all the way over to 24 hours on the right. How many people think they can tell when the homeowner is sleeping from this chart? Raise your hand. Okay, a few of you. Okay, let me spell it out. Okay, the first roughly 7 or 8 hours of that chart, starting from the left hand, those are the sleeping hours, because all you see going on there is the refrigerator, little blips in the refrigerator. That's an automatic thing. Refrigerator turns on and off in order to maintain a certain temperature in the refrigerator. There's no other electrical activity going on in the house. So we know those are sleeping hours. So we know when they wake up. Okay. We know when they make breakfast. We know when they do their laundry, and so forth. So are they getting enough sleep? Is there more than one refrigerator in this house? You can tell that. If there was 2 refrigerators, you'd see a different pattern. Is there more than one stove? Is there more than one washing machine? Could it be there's more than one family living in this house? You could probably figure that out too. Now, who would want this? Well, insurance companies, employers, marketing companies, police. Police might want to know if you were home at the time of the crime. Maybe you have an alibi and you say you were one place and they find out you weren't there or you were someplace else based on this kind of data. Again, Fourth Amendment, they're not supposed to be able to reach into your home and know what you're doing or when you're awake or when you're there or not there, but they can with this. Now, there comes the second phase of the privacy side. Not so smart meters are in your home, and I don't know how you're going to avoid them, actually. That will give the utility the ability to know exactly which appliances you're running when, and it will give them the ability to, in effect, turn off individual appliances. This is part of balancing, this is part of rationing. It's part of balancing the electrical load to match the available supply of electricity. They don't want to keep on building more power plants, so they're going to begin to try to control you in various ways how you use electricity. So one of the things that they could do is they could simply turn off your air conditioning, your washing machine, your dishwasher, any of those major appliances that have major draws could be turned off during peak load if they feel they need to do that in order to keep the demand down to the available supply of electricity. Now, they will sell these programs in the beginning as voluntary programs. They'll say, if you sign up for such and such a program, we'll give you a lower rate for your electricity. Fine. So they said, that sounds good. But eventually, this may well become a mandatory program. All of the necessary technology and infrastructure will be in place. They can turn it into a mandatory program. Or maybe the utility doesn't want to make it mandatory, but the government will order the utility to make it mandatory. Okay. Now, here's another thing. There are such a thing as federal privacy guidelines. These were developed by the National Institute for Standards and Technology, otherwise known as NIST, N-I-S-T. They formed a working group to study and recommend appropriate standards for protecting people's privacy within a smart grid system. This working group was called the Smart Grid Interoperability Panel Cybersecurity Working Group. They issued a report in August of 2010. Now, what were some of their key recommendations? First of all, choice and consent. They say an organization, and by an organization here they mean typically the utility, although maybe could be other kinds of organizations too. But an organization should clearly, fully, and accurately describe the choices that are available to individuals. And to the extent practicable, obtain explicit approval for the collection and use of personal information. Consumers should have the option to forego data collection and services that are not related to the core services provided by the organization. Well, what are the core services of a utility? It's to provide you with electric energy. The core service is to give you energy and to bill you for it once a month. Those are the core services. Why do they need to be collecting all this information again? And according to the National Institute of Standards and Technology, they should be giving you a choice whether you want to opt into that or not. It should be voluntary. Now, what can you do about all this? You say, well, you know, we're helpless. What can we do? Well, first of all, first thing you want to do is inform your utility with a certified letter that you do not consent to the installation of a smart meter in your home. I would highly recommend that as a first step. Second step, put a sign next to your meter to inform the installer you do not consent to such installation. Otherwise, it could be an installer comes out, he doesn't know you wrote a letter. He may be a contract worker rather than a direct employee of the utility. That's what we have on the east side of the state. I don't know if consumers is using contractors. Maybe you can comment on that later. If the meters, if you haven't had one installed yet, we recommend you lock the meter housing. Most meter housings have a hasp where a padlock could be put through it. If you have that type of meter housing, we recommend you padlock it. Now, it's true the installers can cut through a padlock if they choose to do so. We've known that to happen in a few cases, but in most cases that's enough to discourage them and they go away. If the meter's already been installed, demand it be removed. Now, here I have to tell you a story. I'm working with two families over on the east side of the state where they developed very severe health issues soon after smart meter was installed. The wife was not able to sleep at night. She was having nausea, all kinds of things. Every time she would leave the house and go visit somebody for a few days, her symptoms would clear up. She came back to the house, symptoms returned. Now, this is not placebo factor, psychosomatic. She did not even know there was a smart meter on the house until later. All she knew was that at a certain time, a certain month, she started having frequent symptoms like this, and when she left the house, it went away. After this had been going on a few months, some neighbor told her, hey, did you look? Maybe they put a smart meter in there. She didn't even know it was there. She couldn't connect cause and effect. She couldn't create imaginary symptoms in her mind because she didn't even know it was there. So when she found out it was the smart meter and she began to put two and two together and connect the dots, she called the utility, Detroit Edison, and pleaded with them to take the meter off the house. She even had a letter from her doctor, where the medical doctor advised that she should not have a smart meter anymore. She sent that. The utility would do nothing for her. Now, I want to say at this point, it is my impression that this kind of rough treatment that we've seen from Detroit Edison, you're not seeing that kind of rough treatment on this site. From what I understand, consumers' energy has been much more sensitive about dealing with complaints and has in fact agreed to remove meters in some cases where they're creating problems. So they deserve credit for that. But they are just as arrogant as all get out on my side of the state. They force the installations, they will not take them all. Now what happened, so this couple, they got nowhere. It had become a serious threat to the wife's health, and it was also deemed to be a Fourth Amendment violation. Finally, on advice of others, they sent a letter to the utility giving them 21 days to remove the meter. They said in their letter, if you do not remove the meter in 21 days, we will remove the meter. And they went, 21 days went by, they got a letter from the utility that said we disagree with everything you said, we're not taking our meter off the house. So they had bought an analog meter through the internet. They took the smart meter off, they put the analog meter in. They duly recorded all the meter readings, and they safely packed and shipped the smart meter, sent it back to the utility. 2 weeks later, they were served with a lawsuit. Detroit Edison sued this couple. Another couple. This one was the first couple was in Addison Township, Michigan, in Oakland County. Second, another couple, Farmington Hills, Michigan, same thing. Went through the same process, pleaded with the utility, sent them the 21-day letter. No dice, won't take it off the house. They also bought a meter through the internet and replaced it. Now I know of a third situation where this is a woman who was sleeping in a tent in her backyard until it got too cold this fall. She went through that process. She bought a meter and replaced it. Is this a good thing to do? Well, there's several things to consider. First of all, replacing a meter is not rocket science on the one hand. On the other hand, there are some pitfalls. There are some risks. If you don't do it correctly, you can create problems. You could shock yourself. You could not get the meter seated right, and create arcing, which could lead to a fire. And various things could happen. So if you're going to do this, get a qualified person to do it for you. If you don't know anything about electricity, don't attempt it yourself. Get a qualified electrician to do the work for you. And of course, consult an attorney to see the legal ramifications. The first two couples are currently being sued. These cases are in Oakland County Circuit Court. First thing Detroit Edison did was try to get an immediate injunction against the couple and a declaratory judgment. The judge refused to give them that. The judge said Detroit Edison hadn't made its case sufficiently, and it was put on the docket for trial. It's going to come to trial next summer. Same thing with the second case. So you got to know if you do this, though, that there's a real possibility you will be sued. Okay.
Meanwhile, are they using those meters?
Yes. The company, the couples have denied access to the property for purposes of reinstalling the smart meter. So their meter stays on the house, the smart meter did not get reinstalled, and their electric service was not terminated. Okay, that's the end of the privacy presentation. So the other thing is that, just to speak briefly, the other thing is that a bunch of us are doing all we can to fight this thing. There's quite a number of us, mostly over in southeastern Michigan, but we're trying to get some of you folks interested and involved. We did do a meeting similar to this in Holland last August, although the turnout tonight is much higher than what we got in Holland. And we may do other meetings. But the goal, first of all, we were able to get 24 units of local government. That's 22 city governments and 2 county governments to back us. All of these governments passed resolutions. They have no authority. We wish they could pass an ordinance that says no smart meters in our city or no smart meters in our county. They can't do that because the state legislature has given exclusive authority to the Michigan Public Service Commission to regulate utilities throughout the state. Our experience dealing with the Michigan Public Service Commission is that they are not on our side. They have entrenched attitudes. They are very much pro-utility. When I first complained to them, when my friend Joan got a letter about her house, and we called them, the Public Service Commission said, "Can you help us with this?" They said, "No." And I said, "Well, have you given Detroit Edison permission to install these smart meters?" The answer I got was, "They don't need our permission to install smart meters. We don't interfere with the utilities business practices." Quote, unquote. That's an exact quote. That quote was repeated again to other people who contacted them later. It is their mantra. We do not interfere with the utilities business practices. My answer is, well, why are we paying your salary? Wasn't your agency created precisely to control utilities business practices and other things. The read the statute. This agency was created back in the 30s. It was created to regulate the rates, the prices that would be charged for electricity, but also the terms and conditions of service and the quality of service. All of these things are within its purview. Yet the Michigan Public Service Commission has chosen to interpret its mandate only to control rates. They do general rate hearings about once a year for each utility. They set the rates the utility can charge to recover its capital investment. They tend not to get into other areas unless you really push them. Now, that was their attitude initially, but after 9 city governments passed resolutions, they changed their tune. Can everybody hear me okay? Am I talking close enough to the mic? Let me do a little better here. Okay. They changed their tune. After 9 city resolutions said, we think the Michigan Public Service Commission needs to look into this, investigate the health, and we think the Michigan Public Service Commission needs to provide an opt-out for those who object. Every city said that. Half the cities at least said there should have been a moratorium, that they should cease and desist any more installations until a proper investigation of the health effects have been completed. Okay, the Public Service Commission opened the investigation in January of 2012, ran 6 months, culminated in a report June 29th saying we need the health effects to be inconsequential was the word. And they basically just pussyfooted around the privacy issue. They didn't say there's anything wrong with collecting the data, but they said, you know, the utilities should be careful to how they treat the data, how they keep it confidential, and they encrypt the transmission so that hackers can't eavesdrop and so forth and so on. They did say, however, that there should be opt-outs. That was one good thing we got out of that 6-month investigation. The Commission determined that every utility in Michigan that's going to have a smart meter program must offer an opt-out. That is now mandated. So they leave it up to utilities to come up with specific proposals and say opt-out should be on a cost of service principles, they say. What that means is if it's going to cost the utility extra money to take care of people who don't want smart meters, then the people who don't want smart meters should pay extra money to cover those extra costs. Well, it sounds sort of reasonable on the face of it. Let's try to look deeper. What that means, for example, they have to continue sending meter readers around to read the analog meters of the people who won't have the smart meters. Okay, that's a cost. Maybe the people opting out should pay that cost. That's what the commission is saying. Okay, so Detroit Edison came up with a proposal, and Consumers has one too. I'm more familiar with Detroit Edison's. They said people should pay $87 up front to start opting out. If they, okay, that's to change the